Hey guys, what's up? So today we're dealing with barriers to entry. This is a topic that I think is incredibly relevant to all of us today, right? Because if we do want to get involved in politics, what are the obstacles that we have to tackle in order to, actually, make that happen? And, I think it's pretty obvious right now that it's the ability to get really involved in politics, as in run for office, right, is extremely limited to uh, certain few people, right? And if you're not one of those people, it's just incredibly difficult to get involved. So, what are some of those barriers to entries in politics, right? Well, we got some obvious ones, right? Money. It takes a lot of money to run for really any political office. I'm going to be mostly focusing on federal offices right now, but even for local offices, we talked about gerrymandering. We talked about Project Red Map, right? Where even for local offices, stuff like state legislature, which is usually, you know, millions of dollars usually don't get thrown into those races even nowadays, right? Like $1 million per seat is now kind of required for some of these competitive seats, right? Another humongous one related to money, obviously, but separate concept: time. You need a large amount of time to actually campaign and get people to know your name and run for a seat. And if you're an average person, you probably have a full-time job that's cutting into a lot of your time in order to run for politics. What are you going to do it after 5 o'clock? Yeah, it's probably unlikely. Other barriers, right? Political knowledge. You have to kind of understand exactly how the system works. And if you don't understand how the system works, you're unlikely to get involved. And then there's, more structural issues, right? Ballot laws and party membership, how exactly you get your name on the ballot and how you get known, right? We're going to talk specifically about how New York works in this case, right? And then again, this is also a big structural issue, but separate from the ballot laws and party membership, race, gender, religion, right? We're going to focus more of that on our civil rights and Supreme Court stuff because that's really the heavy topic there. But it's important to put that in there that it still can be a barrier to entry in politics without a doubt, right? So let's start off, with the easiest one, the most basic one that everyone can kind of wrap their heads around, right? Money. The average price of a Senate seat, right, is $10.8 million, right? Spent by the candidate, right? In other words, their own money or direct donations, right? And then we consider super PACs, right? We're going to talk about exactly what super PACs are in just a sec. It goes up to $19 million average price of a Senate seat, right? Can you imagine raising $19 million? It's just the money involved in becoming a senator is just astronomical, and it's been increasing pretty much every year, right? For the House, it's a little lower, right? It's 1.5 million, but still 1.5 million for a House seat is a pretty penny. It's a little bit more realistic, especially if you can get a large grassroots base behind you. That's I don't think it's impossible. Obviously, we've seen it done a couple times in the past couple years, past couple election cycles, but still, $1.5 million you have to raise on average in order to win a House seat, right? And again, I talked about local seats, usually quite a bit lower, usually in the a couple $100,000, but again, because of the way we draw the maps and how important state legislatures are in this gerrymandering and this, like we said, this very tactical way of securing the way the congressional maps are drawn. Local seats can be very expensive. Well, it really depends on where you live and how competitive the seat is, right? So, do you think you could run for office? I think the answer, I would say for the most of us, right? It would be incredibly difficult, right? Basically, you can only win a Senate or House seat is to be a fundraising machine, except outside donations from super PACs, right? Or be a multimillionaire from the start, right? Usually, get your start in some sort of business or law or something like that, which I don't think applies to anyone in this class. I would imagine it doesn't, right? And this barrier is just so huge. It obviously makes most people not want to get involved, right? And it's just not glamorous to do all this fundraising, right? You got to be. It really is a full time job to fundraise, and most people don't know about this, but half the time that you're in office, right, you're making phone calls to get $5 from your constituent, right, just so you can possibly win the next race, which is a serious issue and is one of the reasons a lot of things don't get done in Congress, in the Senate in the first place, right? So this brings up the big question: where does the money come from? Right. This is again, like I said, a bigger issue in the Senate than is the House because it's just the requirements for winning a Senate seat because there's so many fewer Senate seats. Right. It's a bigger issue. So 47% of funds come from super PACs in 2016, right? Here we have the governor of Florida. He spent $83 million on a Senate seat. That is just astronomical. That is, I want to hear your opinions, obviously, but it is just such a huge amount of money just to win one Senate seat. It is insane. Did I say I don't know if I said governor or senator, but senator, right? And $83 million on a Senate seat, and obviously a lot of this money isn't coming from voters. It's coming from super PACs, which I'm going to define for you guys right now. And I'm sure you've heard it in the news. I think a lot of people just aren't exactly aware of what a super PAC is, so it's always good to define our terms, right? A PAC is a political action committee, just pretty much a group of people that are involved in politics. Really, the real issue is super PACs, right? They're committees that may receive unlimited. Here's the key: unlimited contributions from individuals, corporations, labor unions, and other PACs for the purposes of financing independent expenditures and other independent political activity. So often, whenever you see those, I'm sure you guys are on YouTube around election season. You get a lot of ads urging you to vote for a particular candidate or to vote against a particular bill. Those usually aren't from the candidate themselves. It's usually from a super PAC. And the super PAC is technically not supposed to be, involved in the campaign. It's a separate entity. It's run by different people, and this is supposed to kind of keep the idea of corruption out of politics, right? That they're separate. They're two separate different things, right? There's some issues with this, right? Unlimited expenditure, right? And I signed some articles this week. This unlimited expenditure thing pretty much comes from the Supreme Court's ruling in Citizens United, right? We hear about this in the news all the time. I want to talk a little bit more on the Supreme Court week, but I definitely want to define it a little bit right now. Long story short, right? The Supreme Court, like I said there was little risk of corruption if if the candidates were not receiving funds directly from individuals. So instead, you have a super PAC. These individuals, these corporations, these labor unions, they give the money to the super PAC, and the super PAC spends the money as they see fit, right? The candidate is actually not deciding where the money is going in theory, right? And then the Supreme Court also rules that, there's no caps to corporate or individual spending to these super PACs because money is essentially free speech, which is definitely something that I want to hear from you guys in your discussion leader post, right? Money equals free speech. How do we feel about this, right? This was not a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court, as you can imagine. Justice Stevens, he was actually one of the longest serving Supreme Court justices of all time. He had this dissent, right? That the majority defined corruption too narrowly, right? And that outside spending could be corrupt too. Just because you have a separate entity doesn't make it any less corrupt, right? And then that in the electoral context, right, in politics, unlimited speech in the form of, which is essentially is ad spending, that's usually what these super PACs really get involved in doing, could drown out the speech of others, right? Effectively trample on your personal free amendment rights, right? If you don't have the ability to kind of get these ads out, if you don't have the ability to hire these people to campaign on your behalf, it really makes it unfair, and you don't have as much speech power as someone that is being backed by the super PAC, right? And then finally, this is kind of like the big thing that they talk about in when they talk about Citizens United. In the articles I assign, it kind of talks about how it's not as big of an issue as it was presented initially, but it's still an issue, right? That corporations are legal entities, right? He's arguing against this, that corporations are legal entities and should not receive the same constitutional rights as people. Essentially, what Citizens United ruled is that corporations have the same rights as a person when it comes to political campaigns, which is feels a little odd just saying that, right? So I'm really interested and what you guys think about the decision on Citizens United. I definitely please read the articles. They go in more depth about this money equals free speech and the issues with Citizens United. But I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say on this particular topic. And then I just wanted to show this quick graph, right? You can see over the years the amount of outside group spending, aka super PACs, right? Spending on federal elections, 1998 to 2014. Obviously, the off years a little bit lower. These are usually for Senate races or special elections, but presidential campaigns. It's just gone up astronomically over the past couple of years. 100, let's just say $1,000,000,000. That is just insane. That number just barely even is comprehensible to me, right? It has gone up so much, so much. But let's move away from the money for just a quick sec, right? Time, as we all know, I'm sure, it's a massive barrier to entry, and it's related to money, but it's its own separate thing, right? If you work 40 hours a week, is that enough time to run a political campaign? And obviously, I think the people that are running for political office tend to be a little bit older, right? Obviously, there are age limits to Senate and House seats, right? And at this point in your life, you probably have kids, you probably have a career and stuff like that. It requires such a sacrifice, right, in order to run for political office. And most people simply just do not have the time to get their name out there and be recognized and have the chance to actually have a real impact on the electoral politics of this country. I want to emphasize electoral politics, right? That means like the people that are elected, right? Because you can certainly have a big impact in politics without being elected, but I'm just making it clear we're talking about elected officials, right? This obviously ties into the gender issue as well, as obviously women tend to be the child care part of the family, right? And if you're taking care of a bunch of kids, that makes it even harder, right? And also dealing with stuff like having a kid, being pregnant, and stuff like that, right? There was a big case actually in Connecticut, where I am right now, where this lady, she fought against the election committee, saying that she couldn't use her campaign funds on daycare, right? They said it was not allowed. She took it to court, and she did win. And she was allowed to use her campaign funds on daycare, which makes sense, right? So she could run for political office. So these are super, relevant issues for pretty much everyone, because again, childcare, especially nowadays, is not relegated to one particular person in a marriage or a partnership, right? These are still real issues, and just overall time, the way our society works, it's very difficult to get enough time to run for political office. Next, political knowledge, right? This one drives me a little bit crazy, right? And this is a systematic issue. This is a real systematic issue where we don't teach civic education in high school, middle school, really at any point, right? Will you run for office if you don't even understand how the government at its core, the basic stuff works, right? And a lot of the evidence and research shows that you probably will not. If you don't have a political education, you're not going to get involved, especially in electoral politics, right? I did some research, right? New York and Connecticut only requires half a credit of civics education throughout your entire secondary education, which is, in my mind, just insane. I really just don't know how much you could possibly learn in just half a semester, right? Essentially, I went through the same thing when I went to high school. I was actually interested in this pretty early on, so I was able to take two, but I think we only really had two total civics classes in high school, right? And another issue with this is just, even if you just go online and type in like how to run for office in New York, finding out this information and finding out how to do it, especially if you're just by yourself and not already involved in like a political party that supports you or anything like that, it is incredibly difficult. So even for people that do have some political knowledge, the information is still quite difficult to acquire, right? This leads into directly the next slide, right? Ballot laws and party membership. This ties, again, everything ties into each other. This is involving stuff that we've already talked about, right? So I just want to remind everyone, right, that in this country we have a winner take all system, right? If you get 50% plus 1% of the vote in that state, you win, right? And so in order to increase your odds, right, you want to have it really only allows for two political parties to exist at the same time, right? Because 50%, 50% really only allows for two parties, right? Um, in New York, if you get the party nomination, you automatically get put on the ballot. So that implies that you're already involved in politics, you're already involved in a political party. What if you don't identify with a political party, right? I believe a lot of us in here are probably independents or have issues with the Democratic or Republican Party. That's what it seems like based on our responses so far. In New York, you can petition to be on the ballot. And again, we're talking about statewide offices. We're talking about senator. We're talking about House of Representatives, but this also kind of applies to local politics. It's just on a smaller scale. But to get on the ballot, you need 1,500 signatures, right? I'm sorry, 15,000 signatures, and at least 100 signatures from half the districts, right? That's a fair amount of signatures, right? And again, maybe this wouldn't be such a big deal, but compounded with the amount of money you need in order to get your name out, the amount of time that you need in order to actually get people to know your name and campaign, right? That 15,000 signatures is a lot. It's a lot. And also, you really need almost double than that because you need to verify all the signatures. There's always going to be people that don't have their signature on file and they cannot simply just accept it, right? So you really need way more than 15,000 signatures just to get on the ballot, right? Which is again wouldn't be so much of an issue because obviously you want people that are viable running for political office, but combined with everything else that's going on in this country, it makes it really super super difficult to get on the ballot and actually have someone check off your name, which is sad because we pride ourselves on being a democracy, and if you're not able to get your ballot on the name, it seems a bit unfair, right? So I don't want to go on too long with this because I think this is one of those weeks where you can really express your opinion, and I think this a lot of people already have a lot of knowledge on this particular topic, right? Because it's so relatable to our lives, and I think it's very obvious, right? So discussion leader question, right? What do you think about the exorbitant amounts of money spent on the state Senate and House seats, right? What about the Citizens United ruling? Again, I didn't go into too much detail on this because I want you guys to read the articles. What about the Citizens United ruling? Do you disagree or agree with it? And there's a lot of parts to this, so if you agree with some of it, if you disagree with some other parts, that's totally fine. I love to hear it. And then tell me how it affects your lives or people that you know, or just what you've seen, right? How has it affected our lives today? I think that's it for me for this lecture right now. There's a lot. There's a lot of ways that we can go. A lot of different tangents, a lot of different directions we can go with this one. So I want to leave it a little bit open ended this week. Okay, guys. I'm going to post this, and I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone's responses, especially the discussion leaders for this week. All right, take it easy, and I'm going to get on the next lecture.